Hi, this is Marina from Dark Star Astrology, and we are looking at the full moon on April the 11th, which falls in Libra Decan 3. And this one is extremely sensitive to the collective's emotions. Well, full moons are anyway, but those who are touched by this full moon in particular will be able to be quite chameleon-like in adjusting themselves to suit their audience, because they'll be able to pick up on what they can feel in the environment around them. So the success of the fixed star here, and the others that are here as well, because it's quite a starry section of the ecliptic, brings even more likelihood of one being able to tap into the zeitgeist. So this full moon has great business sense. It's able to capitalize on this greatly as well. And as far as dignity goes, though, the moon doesn't really have any power in Libra Decan 3, and it even actually feels quite uncomfortable. So despite the very fortunate star Spica, and I'll talk about that later, being activated, or Spica, I'm not really sure how you pronounce Spica, but I've always said Spica anyway. But I think what this translates as meaning is, while the moon is here, there could be danger of someone or some group of people falling out of favour or even being placed in exile. So in my research for the moon in Libra Decan 3, I did literally find cases of exile. Wallace Simpson, for example, and also downfall after great status, which was Marie Antoinette. Now, the moon in Libra 3 is actually defined as being peregrine, which means that it's got no dignity whatsoever. And that means it's not its domicile, it's not at home there. It's got no other minor conditions of dignity as well, which is sometimes, it might be in a decan that it's okay in, or in exaltation, or in mutual reception, or something like that. But it is defined as peregrine, which is a wanderer. It's essentially a sort of gypsy, really. And so when a planet is peregrine like this, it does carry the status of someone who's like an outlaw or an anti-hero. And that's kind of a similar energy to what Decan 3 has as well. So we've got a doubling of this exiled. It's actually a refugee type of energy, strangely, but I see it more as somebody like Julian Assange, who is essentially in exile for views that the government or the globalists are not want to suppress, because he's revealing their corruption, isn't he? And that really is the essence of Libra Decan 3 and the Eris, Venus, Lucifer archetype. And at the moment, Venus is actually in her Lucifer phase as well. And she's also still in retrograde also. So will Lady Lucinda shed some light onto the confusion in the world right now? And with the full moon on Spica as well, Spica is a very bright star too. So this is all about shedding light on what's going on. So the meaning generally for Spica is, by the way, she's found in the wheat sheaf held by Virgo as well. And Virgo is very connected with Spica, and Spica is also very connected with Ceres, and Ceres is really connected with Persephone as well. So all those themes, they're still there, plus the fact that we have Uranus and Eris conjunct in the sky at 24-23 Aries, and the moon, the sun of this full moon is going to be at 21 Aries, and the moon is 21 Aries. So, those degrees are really being heated up at the moment. So Spica gives success, renown, riches, a sweet disposition, love of art and science, unscrupulousness, though, unfruitfulness, and injustice to the innocent. So but on the other side, many elected charts for business or marriage will aim to have speaker rising, because having it rising gives unbounded good fortune, happiness, ecclesiastical preferment, unexpected honour or advancement well beyond natives' hopes and capacity. So it's strange because there is a contradiction in this kind of grain goddess archetype of being fruitful, yet Virgo was seen as being a barren sign by ancient astrologers or traditional astrologers. So I guess we could say that Speaker is more about fertility, that is more to do with ideas and creativity, and less about fertility that's biological. So also really the priestess archetype, or even the priest archetype as well, it does tend to have to be celibate or unmarried or be unencumbered by biological products, shall we say, children. Now, Speaker's fortune can also come from good timing, and successful people know how to align themselves with the cycles, when to sow and when to reap, when to buy and when to sell. So Venus as Lucifer, as she currently is really again a replay of the Persephone myth, in that she's resurrected herself as the morning star after having gone through the underworld. She now has more of the qualities of Lilith. She's been through the sort of innocent Virgo and Ceres stage, and has come up as the Eris, as the phoenix from the flames. And during this full moon, we're going to have this intense T-square, which will reactivate Uranus square Pluto to some extent, and is also being karmically adjusted by a Mars-Ceres conjunction, which is really tight. So if you look at the chart for the full moon, there you see it, that massive T-square. Plus, there's also Venus square Saturn as well. So there's a lot of tension at the moment, and we can already see it. We have so many retrograde planets in the sky as well. Mercury's currently retrograde as well. Just in the news, we've had the Russian St. Petersburg bombing. Just seen some really horrible pictures of children attacked by chemical weapons in Syria. So Ceres, this is the innocent, this is the children, and then you've got Mars attacking. And the aspects, Moon square Pluto, that's a really intense and hungry aspect. It's the raging Kali archetype. Can be obsessive. It can be the obsessive possessive mother, or someone who's obsessed by being a mother. But it's also the aspect of exposés, hacking, covert operations, and skilled invaders as well. With the moon opposite Uranus, that's very electric and volatile energy, even more unstable when it's in opposition, wild mood swings, and the feel of a loose cannon. In mundane astrology, it signifies accidents or assassinations. They can be anger, shock, or deep mourning. So those, it's all coming to a head, and a lot of it could come to a head at this full moon. But there is some karmic balancing going on from the moon and Ceres. I'm just wondering whether there's going to be something like a natural disaster, because Ceres can be the angry mother, the angry earth, and Mars can be explosive. So it might not, there's enough man-made terrorism and shocks and war going on at the moment as well, but it could be something quite volcanic. So with this full moon, then, we must use the power of the feminine right brain to intuit what is happening below the surface, even if it does exile us. As a lot of us know deep down in our gut what is true, but it's funny, we want to say things, we want to just speak straight out, but we always have to double check and think, hang on, can I say that? And that's when the political correct filter comes through. And we work with it all the time. But when people just speaker, from the gut and from their instincts, they will probably get a lot of rejection, because speaking the truth does hurt. And if we have to constantly be treading on eggshells with anybody, then you know that person isn't right for you, or that group of people aren't right for you. And there's a lot of confusion now as well about this kind of return of the divine feminine, having to do, people confusing that with feminism. And I don't think it has anything to do with feminism, because the right brain, divine feminine, is pure intuition and empathy. And this Holy Spirit state has been hijacked and isolated from the left masculine side of the brain. And the reason it's being done like that is so that half of the brain can so easily be enslaved by the organized, and I call them the Yahweh religions now, which are, basically the Abrahamic religions, because they need, the cult behavior that happens, it's very Neptunian, and they target, unfortunately, because women do tend to be, even with our gender, we do tend to be more intuitive and empathic because of our role as primary caregiver to children, because children grow inside of us. Even with genetics, the female gene genetics are passed down through the mother line. So people who deny gender by saying it's a construct are they're ignoring reality. So I don't want to get into a sort of rant about the gender thing, but all I'm trying to say is that this separation between the two sides is going on big time, whether it's male and female, whether it's the races, whether it's the right and left wing. The polarization is in full throttle, and at this full moon as well, it's very evident. You can see it in the chart. You've got still the emphasis of Aries, the shocking Aries side of things, which I think is the kind of divine masculine, where it's got Uranus, which is very Promethean in its nature. Eris, who was the sister of Aries, by the way, and she was the one exiled for not being in with the in-group. And just one thing to say, in the West, we are very individualistic, and Uranus is very much, or Prometheus. I think a lot of people say that Uranus should have been called Prometheus because it is more in spirit with the meaning of Uranus. This kind of the respect for the individual, and anti-hive mind thinking and anti-tribal thinking that we have in the West is almost part of our downfall, because how I see it now is that there seems to be a resurging of nationalism, which is now realizing how important it is to keep the identity. We're still into identity, and we're still into keeping diversity, because diversity is kept by ensuring everyone is allowed to have their own distinct geographical, which is Sarah's, their distinct geographical characteristics that come from the land that you live in, and the temperature that you live in, and how the seasons work in your region. That's how religion develops around. The pagan religions developed around that. So in that stellium in Aries, the horned god that I talked about in the last full moon, new moon, the new moon in Aries. Opposite that, we have this kind of balance, equality, Jehovah influence, which is very, I would say, the divine feminine. And there's nothing wrong with the divine feminine because we need it. Obviously, it's the Holy Spirit. We need that empathy, but we can't just have that on its own because both sides on their own are very dangerous and very toxic. So this is why I think feminism is so dangerous, because a woman on her own, she's a binary unit actually, and she doesn't do well on her own. Libra doesn't do well on her own. Aries does. Aries is an individual. Aries can be very self-sufficient, and won't infringe on anybody else when they're solo, because they're quite happy being solo. So they're not going to parasite on anyone else. They're not going to be a vampire off anybody else. Whereas, and I'm not saying all women are like this, but generally, a single woman has a harder time being single. Although I used to think that single men had a harder time being single. In a way they do in terms of, feminism says that single men have a hard time being single because they can't look after themselves, poor lovies. They can't cook for themselves and they need a mother to look after them. And maybe physically, maybe just in practical terms, they are not very good at looking after themselves. But I think this is only if they've had mothers who completely smothered them. And so if they have no sort of transition period where they've had to look after themselves, and before they used to do national service, they used to go to the army and they'd learn how to bloody, shine their shoes and do housework and things, doing sewing stuff, they did that. And I think men who have done things like that are very self-sufficient and are less likely to need a mother, a woman to look after them and take care of them. Solo women really, really, really need a coven of witches to connect with, because otherwise they go pretty batty. We go pretty batty. Hello, I'm a woman. Hence, Catwoman. We need someone to be the Aries. We need someone to push against. We need someone to debate with. And if we're not with children, or a group of other like-minded women, then the Kali archetype, the raging mother who has no children to put her nurturing energies into, will often want to rescue, and then it ends up rescuing men. It ends up rescuing men who are broken in some way. And then these men become their pet project. I've definitely seen this happen with men as well, more men who are more on the sort of right brain side of things. The more artistic men tend to do the same with women. They tend to pick the bad girls. So it does happen the other way around. I'm not saying it's just one way. But generally, it is very important to see the differences between the masculine and the feminine, the male and the female, because once we understand the behavior patterns that go with that, we can understand the world a little bit more. So I'm going to re-evaluate a lot of my old posts that I wrote about Lilith and Eris, because I'm going to call it Deconstructing Lilith, because one thing that I can safely say about feminism, it's totally unnatural. It's totally going against the laws of nature and natural law. And a lot of people are not using the term feminist anymore, but there is also this kind of goddess worship thing too, which is kind of the same thing. It's a new age version of feminism where there's a lot of patriarchy bashing and no respect at all for the divine masculine. Or they say they do, but then when it comes down to it, if you defend men at all, or kind of infer that you might be projecting onto them, just as they do to women, it's both ways. But this is the two-way street that we need to address. There's victims on both sides, left and right, black or white, male and female. There's victims on both sides. And at the moment, it's kind of divided into, you're the predator, I'm the victim, you're the psychopath, I've got nothing to do with this at all, I'm just this martyr, you're Pluto, I'm Neptune, and it's just way too black and white. And the thing with Libra Decan 3, it is an opportunity for us to look at this polarity, because Libra, these are cardinal signs. It's never more. It's the most dramatic. The polarity of the male and the female, the divine feminine, the divine masculine in Libra, I think, and Aries. That axis is the spring equinox, and we are in this spring equinox energy at the moment, and having the full moon in its opposite sign in Libra, where the sun falls and goes into autumn, it's fall. We can sort of see where the fallen lady comes from, the falling down the rabbit hole, the falling into the underworld. What is all that about? And both sides have to take responsibility for things as well. And another thing I wanted to say as well, we've all been guilty on all sides. I've been on both sides of this kind of political debate. And when I was a lefty, I used to, you blame the evil capitalists and you hate the rich, and there's this class warfare that goes on, especially when you're a student, And if you haven't had children as well, you don't really get it until you've had children. And then when you have children, when you're older, and you start to go more towards the conservative side, and conservative is the word, because you want to conserve things, you want to preserve things, you want to conserve what you've worked hard for all your life to pass on to your children. And you don't want some fly-by-night to come along and just go, well, I'm entitled to this because your ancestors did this to my ancestors 500 years ago, or whenever it was. If you do that, you end up it's an eye for an eye, isn't it? An eye for an eye leaves people both blind, all that kind of stuff. You have to stop it somewhere. And I just think everybody has the choice. If they don't like discrimination where they are, or if they don't like the way somebody's treating them, they can just walk away. They can. So it's unfair to go somewhere and say to or be with someone and then constantly berate them for not being affectionate enough, not giving you enough presents, not. I mean, this is the negative side of Libra, by the way. It's never enough. And I find that with men aren't females. Men can't often give Venusian types enough emotional support, or they're not being feminine enough for them. Not all men can be your best friend, your gay best friend, basically, and it's not fair. I don't think it's fair to put that on them either. And the same can be said of countries. If you move to another country and you say that their culture isn't welcoming of your culture, then go to a culture that is. And this is the problem with very individualistic cultures, is that they want to try and make everyone at home. They want, they like the vibrancy of lots of different people, because they're interested in lots of different people. That's why cultures who are seafarers, who are travelers, are genuinely curious about other cultures, and they want to learn from different religions. That's why we like, there's a lot of fascination with Buddhism in the West, and Eastern spirituality, and all sorts. But it's just the world is going insane. All right, as far as I'm concerned, it's going insane, and I think most people think this. But I just have to say as well, we think most people don't think like this. Actually, they do, because there's only a very small % of people running the media, and their mindset is very, very tiny in the whole scheme of the whole wide world. Most of the world, when you look at the cultures of China, India, Africa, everywhere, are tribal. Do not try and accommodate every tiny difference between every teeny weeny special snowflake. Because if they were like the West, then there would be more people wanting to move there. But the thing is, the exodus is all leaving these totalitarian, socialistic, everybody's equal type oligarchies, really, for the individualistic West. But then when they do that, they bring their everybody is equal philosophy with them, and then insist on that in the countries where everyone's an individual. And very soon, those countries where everyone's kind of free to be an individual and special won't be like that anymore. And there'll be nowhere to go. So here we are at this full moon. Those are the themes. And I think what's happening now is that the West now realizes that it either in order to survive, it has to get tribal, basically, and look after its own people, because it's pretty obvious now that the exodus of people from areas of unrest, and these are from places that aren't anything to do with Western powers bombing, although this is happening. I know it is. So, but again, whenever people say whenever I have this argument and people say, yes, but we are bombing them. Who's we? I don't want us to be. Most people don't. We don't want this. Our governments are. And every time we try and fight against them and say, we don't want this, let's just look after our own territory, then you're called bigoted. And that's another thing about this open borders thing. Apparently, open borders is fine, but if we try and mess around with other countries' borders, then that's colonialism. So make your bloody mind up. So yes, we the people, we the cannon fodder, and we the people who aren't working in mainstream media with salaries that can afford you a nice flat where you've got security and all that sort of stuff. We the Prometheans who work on independent media and just are doing it just because we must. We just feel we must, and we need to speak out, or we'll go insane. For our psychic and spiritual health, it's not for anything else. It's not for money. It's not for. I mean, you're going to get criticised as well, and you're going to get trolling and hate emails or whatever. we just keep doing it. We just keep doing it because the more people who speak out, the more you feel that you have got a common tribe around you who shares the same values, pagan values. And this is something that the divine feminine needs. And females need especially. So it's very lonely for me because I feel like a bit of a lonely heiress where I could have a band of easy, make loads of money from doing the Lilith thing, the empowering Lilith thing. But what I found with that is that most women who are into that don't really want to face the dark side of the divine feminine. They say they do, but what they really want is to keep on being told, yes, women were burnt as witches, patriarchy's evil. In order to reclaim your divine feminine, you can sleep around and generally, do the sacred prostitute thing. The divine feminine is chaste. It's Virgo. It's not being a porn queen, basically, or porn star for your guy, or whatever it is. It's not that. So this is why I'm going to do a series called Reconstructing Lilith, because there is a positive side to this. There is the resurrection. There is the phoenix from the flames, but the phoenix from the flames is Persephone repurifying herself through the fire of an abusive relationship. Yes, it is that, but the purification also happens when you realize, I don't want to be a victim of this anymore. I'm going to crown myself as queen and also stop blaming the guy for this situation, because they've also been victims of this horrendous, narcissistic, parasitical, vampirical, alien infiltration of this world by Abrahamic religions. That's all I'm going to say. I think that sums it up. All right then, that's the end. Bye-bye.